Welcome to our Maundy Thursday service. I hope you've got the necessary supplies you'll need. If you haven't, do pause the video and find a roll or loaf of bread you can break, some wine or blackcurrant squash, and a bowl of water. We'll tell you what to do with them in a minute. The first part of our service is designed for children and parents, and that leads into a video, a reading, and a time for reflection that are more suitable for young people and adults. On Maundy Thursday, we remember especially the Last Supper that Jesus shared with his disciples before his arrest. In the life of the church, the Last Supper has become the Lord's Supper, which we usually call Holy Communion, because when we share it, we know fellowship with Jesus and with one another. But the Last Supper itself was a Passover meal, which Jews would have shared at this time of year. So some of our children are going to help us think about that now. So if your wine and bread and water are ready, then let's begin.
So what was so special about the meal that Jesus ate with his disciples the night before he died?
Well, Jesus and his friends were Jewish, and they were eating the Passover meal. It was a really special meal that God's people ate, and they really looked forward to it. A bit like we look forward to eating Christmas dinner or Easter dinner. And the food and the drink on the table, so the wine and the bread, it reminded them of a special story from long, long ago. God's people had been slaves in Egypt. They had to work really hard for no money, and they were very, very unhappy.
So what did they do about it?
Well, Moses kept on asking Pharaoh to let his people go. But Pharaoh kept on saying, no! So God sent 10 plagues.
Dun, dun, dun.
You know this story?
Oh, I know this story. Isn't it where 10 plagues, such as the plague where the River Nile turns to blood,
Yeah.
and that there were more diseases, flies and frogs?
Yeah, and locusts and hailstorms and boils.
And not very good stuff.
Not very good stuff. Lots of not very good stuff. But do you remember what the last plague was? It was so terrible, this last one. And here's a clue.
Is it where people had to put blood on their doors?
Yes, they painted blood over their doorposts. And that was when the angel of death passed over their doors, and their children, their families were saved. But the Egyptian firstborn children died. And then Pharaoh had had enough. And he told God's people to go and never to come back. They were finally free.
Hooray!
They were not slaves anymore. And Moses led them to a land of their own where they could be happier. Now, this Passover meal was a celebration of God rescuing his people from Egypt. Now, Jesus and his friends were remembering that happy story from long, long ago. And Jesus also used this meal to explain what was happening to him and what would happen to God's people in the future.
Why is there a bowl of water on the table? Can we drink it?
No, this water is for washing our hands, just like we do before a meal, to wash away all the dirt and germs that might spoil our food.
Did Jesus wash his hands?
Actually, Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, and they would have been really dirty because the roads of Jerusalem were so dusty. Jesus' friend Peter thought that Jesus was far too important to wash other people's feet. But Jesus said we should all be happy to wash each other's feet. We should learn to care for one another just like Jesus cares for us.
Bread is a really important part of the Passover meal. It's broken in two, like this, and one half is hidden. I'm going to go and hide the bread now, and families at home might like to do this too. So pause the video whilst you do this. No peeking.
Why is the bread broken in two?
Well, the broken bread is like the world. God has done a lot of good things for his people and for the world, but the world is still broken. Bad things still happen. And that makes God sad, just like when we feel sad when something precious of ours gets broken. God loves the world and he wants to mend it. So the Jewish people were waiting for God to send a very special person called the Messiah to mend things.
So who is the Messiah? Who will mend the broken world?
Jesus said that he is the Messiah. He said that he would mend the world, but that to do this, his body would need to be broken like the bread. When he died on the cross, his body would be broken, but this would be how the mending of the world would begin. And Jesus said that people who believe in him will be forgiven for all the bad things that they've done so that they can be friends with God. So our friendship with God will be mended too. Right, now it's time for you and all the other children to go and find the bread that's been hidden and bring it back to the table. You might want to pause the video while you do this. Off you go.
Elijah, please can you pour the wine or juice into these 4 cups? Children watching at home, you might want to do this too. So if you do, pause the video.
Why are there 4 cups of wine, Mummy?
Well, the first cup is a reminder of God's promise to get his people out of Egypt. The second cup is a reminder of the plagues that God sent to Pharaoh. The third cup is a reminder that God rescued his people. And the last cup is a reminder of God's plan to mend the world once and for all. But Jesus didn't drink the last cup.
Why didn't Jesus drink the last cup?
Well, because he said he would wait to drink that cup with us when we're all together with him at a big party when God has mended the world.
Why do people eat bread and drink wine at church?
So, when we eat the bread and we drink the wine, we remember Jesus' meal with his friends. And we remember that he died for us so that everything could be mended once and for all. So, let's eat some bread and drink some wine or squash. And remember what Jesus did for us.
One of those at the Passover meal with Jesus was Peter, the leader of the disciples who had followed Jesus everywhere he went for the past 3 years. For Peter, this night was always going to be a night to remember, a painful and distressing incident, but one that we can often identify with so much ourselves. In this video, Peter tells his own story.
You're the Christ. He asked us who he said he was. That's what I said. You're the Christ. You know, he rode a donkey into Jerusalem, right? People laying down a procession of palm leaves for the one we'd all been waiting for. It was like one of those pinch me moments. Then Passover came. Me and the boys are tucking into the flatbread and Jesus just comes out with it. One of you dipping bread in the balsamic's gonna turn me in, he said. Then he takes the bread, tears and shares it. What are you waiting for? Tuck in, he said. This is my body, broken, beaten, bruised, for you. Then he gives thanks and passes round the bread. Drink up, he said. This is my blood, poured out for plenty. A bit later, we're up the Mount of Olives with Jesus. You know, when push comes to shove, you're all going to bail on me, he said. No chance, I said. The rest of them might. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Count on it, he said. Before the night's over, you'll swear blind you don't even know me, he said. On my life, I'll never deny you. I'll die for you, I said. It all happened so fast. 1 minute, we're with Jesus as he's praying up Gethsemane and we're sparked out unconscious the next. They've got Jesus in handcuffs. And all I can remember is what he said. That we'll bail on him. That we'll deny him. That I'll deny him. I'm not having it, I thought. He's got it wrong, I thought. So I drew out my sword. I gripped my teeth and I let rip. I cut this guy's ear clean off. Come on, let's have it. Enough, Jesus said. As he just goes quietly and I just legged it. I tailed him till we ended up at the chief priest's place. Me in the courtyard, outside by the fire, him inside, standing trial. Trial. Witnesses fabricating fake news, trying to pin something on Jesus that would land a death penalty. You got nothing to say, they said. No defence, they said, goaded him. Give it to us straight. Are you the Christ, they said. I am, he said. Enough said, as the guards struck him, stripped him and spat on him. Bang! Go on! Prophesy who landed that right up, they said. Meantime, I'm warming my hands by the fire, trying to keep a low profile. Although there's only so much blending in you can do when you're watching your best mate and mentor get the living daylights kicked out of him. Hang about. I know you, the servant girl said. Must have one of those faces, I said. No, you're one of his lot from Nazareth, she said. Don't know what you're talking about, love, I said. I made a beeline for the exit, but now she's got a captive audience. Hey, guess who he's friends with, she said. Thinks she's had a bit too much of the Merlot, I said, but they won't let it go. I could see them eyeballing me, working it out in their head. Come on, mate. If you're not from Galilee, I'll eat my own sandal. On my mother's life, I've not even met the guy. The cockerel crows a second time. And that's when I see him, tossed around like a tear and share flatbread. Broken, beaten, bruised. Just like he said. And with a bottle's worth of red blood smeared across his face, he looks at me. He looks right at me, right into the depths of me, and all I can remember is what I said. I'll never deny you. I'll die for you. 3 times you'll deny me, Pete, he said. And I just broke down and wept.
Traditionally, on Maundy Thursday, we listen to the gospel account of Jesus' agony in the garden, his betrayal and arrest, and then spend time in vigil, in silence, as we watch with the disciples in prayer, and then leave one another without a blessing, without talking, fleeing, as it were, from one another as Jesus' disciples fled from him the night of his arrest. After Ruth has read the passage for us, there will be some music and images to help us as we reflect on all this now, on all that Jesus went through for us.
Our reading is taken from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verses 31 to 62. And Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, Simon, listen. Satan has demanded to sift all of you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your own faith may not fail, and you, when once you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." And Peter said to him, "Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death." Jesus said, "I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow this day until you have denied 3 times that you know me." He said to the disciples, "When I sent you out without a purse, bag, or sandals, did you lack anything?" They said, "No, not a thing." He said to them, "But now the one who has a purse must take it, and likewise a bag. And the one who has no sword must sell his cloak and buy one. For I tell you, this scripture must be fulfilled in me." And he was counted among the lawless. And indeed what is written about me is being fulfilled. They said, "Lord, look, here are 2 swords." He replied, "It is enough." He came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. When he got up from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping because of grief. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you may not come into the time of trial." While he was still speaking, suddenly a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus said to him, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you are betraying the Son of Man?" When those who were around him saw what was coming, they asked, "Lord, should we strike with the sword?" Then one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple police, and the elders who had come for him, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as if I were a bandit? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. But Peter was following at a distance. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him in the firelight, stared at him and said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." A little later, someone else, on seeing him, said, "You also are one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And then about an hour later, yet another kept insisting, "Surely this man also was with him, for he is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." At that moment, while he was still speaking, the cock crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the cock crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.